So when we come to the Hebrew, it's a little bit more complicated.
Yes.
So Hebrew Matthew survives on this verse in 20 different manuscripts.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if that's correct. You know what? It survives in this section on 20 different manuscripts, but this specific verse is actually, am I right, only in 19? Right. Because Manuscript G doesn't have this verse at all. Manuscript G, which I call part of group, I broke them up into two groups, A and B, and really largely based on this verse, on this whole passage, but really this verse. So let's just remind the audience what we talked about in episode, I think 13, that group A of the Hebrew Matthew manuscripts has verse 2 followed by verse 3, which, of course verse 3 is followed by verse 2. Not of course.
Yeah.
Which is then followed by verse 5, which is then followed by verse 4, which is then followed by verse 8.
Yes.
Now, group B also has verses 2 and 8. But between verses 2 and 8, it only has verse 4. It doesn't have verses 3 and 5. Among those, Manuscript G is also missing verse 4. So it goes from verse 2 to verse 8. Now, why are these verses missing? And there's obviously two possibilities. One possibility is that we have a scribal error in the Hebrew in the manuscripts where it's missing. And what do I mean by a scribal error? A scribe is copying and he's looking back and forth he has two texts. He has the source he's copying from, the first manuscript, the source manuscript, and the second manuscript he has that he's copying from. And he's constantly looking back and forth. And every time he looks back and forth, he stores in his memory 2 or 3 words. And he even may say those words out loud, right? So let's say he's copying verse 1. He says, he looks in the source, Vayhi achrei zeh, and he writes, Vayhi achrei zeh. Ba'etahi, ba'etahi. Vayar hachavurot, and he looks to the one where he's copying, and he writes Vayar hachavurot. So he stores a few words in his memory. There are traditions where it talks about how the scribes would actually say these words out loud. There's other traditions. For example, in the Greek world, it's supposedly they have this description where one scribe would read it out loud and the second scribe would write. We don't really have evidence of that in the Jewish world. They would be looking back and forth, and probably for most Greek manuscripts as well. So here's what happens. When he looks back to his source, sometimes what happens is he looks to the wrong place. How does he look to the wrong place? So let's say you have several words in a series of verses that are identical. And so he looks, and here we have a beautiful example. How many verses here do we have that begin with the word ashrei? Right? So we have, and that's called a homoio arcton. Homoio is the Greek word for similar. Homoio arcton means the similar beginning.
Yes.
So he's a series of verses with a similar beginning. 1, 2, and I'm talking just in the Hebrew, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you could say maybe 7 because it's a similar beginning. So 7 verses.
Yes.
And finally we have so verse 12 doesn't begin with Ashrei. So we have 7 verses in the Hebrew version of group B, where it begins with the same beginning, Ashrei, Ashrei, Ashrei. And then we have in the Greek, we have 9 verses that begin with the same beginning. So it's possible the scribe, he's looking back and forth, and he comes to the end of the verse, and he looks for the next verse, which begins with Ashrei. And instead of copying the verse he wanted to copy, he copied the next verse. That's homoio arcton. Now, homoio arcton, the similar beginning, can cause 2 different types of errors. And this is, by the way, I'm giving you guys now a crash course into textual criticism. It can cause the error of haplography. Haplography, think of the word half. Sounds like half. Haplography. Haplography is where I have 2 elements. 2 verses, and they both begin Ashrei. So let's say for group A, I have verses 2, 3, 5, 4, and 8, right? So now the scribe who created group B, and this is one way that it might have happened. He's copying verse 2. Okay, great. He's then looking for the verse that begins with Ashrei. And instead of going to verses 3 and 5, he jumps to verse 4.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why? Because he remembered the next word was ashrei, and he looks back at his source and he copies the word ashrei.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So haplography is I've lost a verse. You also have dittography. Dittography, think of the word ditto.
Mm-hmm.
Dittography is where I copy the same thing twice. Now, I want to show you something, as I wasn't even planning on doing this, but since I'm giving the crash course in textual criticism, I'm going to show you an example of dittography in the Tanakh. And I was just looking at this yesterday.
Oh, this is good. Hey, this is the good stuff, you guys.
This is really good stuff. You're not going to even believe this, Keith.
Yeah, okay.
Why is this such good stuff? I'm going to show you in a minute. So here we have in 1 Samuel, let me pull it up. In 1 Samuel, you have a series of verses, and I'm actually to ask you to read it in English.
1 second.
And then the people, just listen for the repeated words, because the repeated words, those are the words that will cause our homoio. Homoio is the similar. You have the similar beginning called homoio arcton, and homoio televton is the similar ending. We're not dealing here with homoio televton. So the similar beginning. Guys, this is really foundational stuff because there's so many things in the Tanakh and in the New Testament that kind of don't make sense until you're aware of this type of problem. You'll see scholars say, well, some manuscripts read, and you're like, well, why do they read that way? I don't know. Well, now you know. Now you'll know why. So let's start in 1 Samuel 16, verse 8.
Okay. Verse 8. Then Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel, and he said, neither has Yehovah chosen this one. Next, Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, neither has Yehovah chosen this one. Then Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to Jesse, Yehovah has not chosen these. Continue.
All right, well, let's stop there for a second. So we had 2 verses 9 and 10, and they both begin with the same 2 words, Vaya'aver Yishai, and Yishai, or Jesse, caused to pass before, or pass over. And then the following word begins with the same letter, Shammah, Vayaver Yishai Shammah, and Jesse caused to pass there, or Vayaver Yishai Shivat, and Jesse caused to pass 7. So we have 2 verses that begin with the same exact 2 words, and then the third word has the same letter. So this is rife for homoio arcton, the similar beginning. If we looked in all the manuscripts of the Tanakh, I would be shocked if we didn't find a manuscript somewhere where this mistake occurred. And lo and behold,
no. You found one?
A year and a half ago, I was in Geneva, Switzerland, where I had the very blessed opportunity to examine one of the 6 major manuscripts of the Tanakh. And the manuscript is called Sassoon 1053. And I was examining Sassoon 1053 for this exact verse. And what do I find? I find homoio arcton, not of haplography, where there's 2 verses and one was lost, but dittography, where there's 2 verses and one was copied a second time. So let me show this to you, okay?
Excellent. Hey, are you going to show our folks? Are you going to find a way to show it?
I'm going to share the screen here.
While he's looking, stop just for a second. Now listen, guys, listen to this now. I don't know where you folks are at in terms of the significance of studying scripture, but we're studying with a guy who doesn't even have this planned in his head when we start this thing. And it just comes to him. He says, and not only does he take us to the verse, he says, I've seen the manuscript.
I held it in my hands, Keith. I actually did images of it with a microscope that I'll share one day. No.
Okay, awesome.
It's pretty cool stuff. Okay, this is page 259 of Sassoon 1053. And here you can see something happened. What happened? So somebody erased the corrector, and it seems it's the original scribe. Why do I say it's the original scribe? Because what the scribe would do is he would write the consonants, and he would come then, either he or a second scribe would come and write the vowels and accents. And you can see whoever erased this never wrote the vowels and accents. The vowels and accents were never added. I can see that particularly, for example, in this word. And what did he do? He didn't erase the whole word. He erased the bottom half of the word. Why did he do that? Because spaces in the Hebrew manuscripts have significance. If there's a space of an entire line or a half a line or part of a line, a significant size space, that means this is the end of a thought, and now here's a new thought. So what they would often do is if they need to erase something, is they would only erase the bottom half of the letters to say, hey, this is erased. They would also not put in accents and vowels. But another way they would do it is they would erase the bottom half, and erasing the bottom half told you, okay, don't read these words. Well, you can't even read them. They're hard to read. These words are erased, but this is not a space that was intended. This is a space caused by erasure. So how do I know this is erased? So I held it in my hands, and I could see he scratched off parts of the parchment here on these bottom 3 lines. And what exactly happened? So we had the case of homoio arctone, which was the similar beginning. Remember, just like in Matthew 5, we have a series of verses that all begin Ashrei, Ashrei, Ashrei. In the Greek, it's a parallel word. And here he has Vaya'aver Yishai, and Yishai caused to pass. And here I could see the remnants, the top half of the words, Vaya'aver Yishai. So he copied the verse, and then when he got to the end of the verse, which was here, he copied the verse a second time. And he actually ended up erasing the first 2 words of the second instance and then filled them in. He went back because he realized, I shouldn't have erased the bottom half of these 2 words. These 2 words we need. So he had to rewrite the bottom half of the words Vayevel Yishai. And then here in the next column, you could see at the top of the column is the full verse. Vayevel Yishai Shama, Vayomer Gam Bazeh Lo Bachal Yehovah. Now here's the really cool thing, Keith. What are the last 3 words of the verse? Lo, not, Bachal, he chose, Yehovah, meaning Yehovah did not choose. Okay, so, and look, the next verse begins Vaya'aver, which is what Vayaver Yishai Shivat. Right? So instead of jumping to the second verse, he copied the first verse twice. Okay, that's dittography from the word ditto, as opposed to haplography, which is from the word half, where we lose half of it, or connect it with the word half. That reminds me of that. Okay, so here's the beautiful thing. What were the last 3 words of the verse that he copied twice? Lo b'chal Yehovah. We actually have a second thing going on here, which is called homoio televton, the similar ending. Okay? Because lo b'chal Yehovah, and the following verse also ends lo b'chal Yehovah. So this was rife for error, right? He's looking back and forth, and he sees, I just copied lo b'chal Yehovah. Let me now look back and find those words and copy whatever comes after it. And that's what he did. But here's the really, really beautiful thing. So this verse is erased. And I can tell you what it says. I know exactly what it says because he copied the same verse twice. Vayavel Yishai Shama, and this is the top of Shin Mem He. Vayomer, and he said, Gam Bazeh, also in this, Lo Bachal Yehovah.
Oh, just a second.
And the scribe erased Yehovah. This is momentous.
No, this is momentous.
This is a very big deal. Why is this a very big deal?
Oh, my goodness.
I researched for years a question. Let's back up. I started out, Keith, with the hypothesis. First, I started out with the observation that in the Aleppo Codex, the most important manuscript of the Tanakh, the name is usually written without the full vowels, just like it's written here without the full vowels, by the way. And every once in a while, the scribe put in the full vowels, the full vowel Yehovah, and people said to me, no, Nehemia, it's not possible. If there was you're telling us the scribe made a mistake. And I said, yes, he made a mistake that was right. I did a study, Keith, called The Mistake That Got It Right.
That got it right. It's epic. It's an epic.
It is epic. So The Mistake That Got It Right. And in that study, I said something to the effect of that I was told, I was told that when the scribes made a mistake with the name in the Aleppo Codex, they never erased a vowel or an accent. And I remember, I don't know if I said it in this study or a different study, I said that this was based on a database that was compiled over years in the 1970s and 80s by scholars who examined the Aleppo Codex directly. And I said something to the effect of, I wish I could see it for myself, that database. Not only have I seen the database for myself, but I actually got to see the Aleppo Codex for myself. And not for 5 minutes like when I was there with Reggie White, but for 9 hours I got to sit with it and examine it. And what I found within the first probably 15 minutes of studying the database is that what I was told, was wrong. Not only did they erase the accents and vowels in the Aleppo Codex, but I found 5 places where they erased the letters. The actual letters. Now, why is that such a big deal? It's such a big deal because there's a rabbinical law